That was an epic teapot. Did I see that correctly? It's sort of the size of your head, or is that just an optical illusion?
Yeah, it's a liter teapot. It makes me know how much tea I'm drinking.
Well, do we want to do the intro? I mean,
yeah,
I have a plan.
Yeah, of course. We want to do the intro.
I will declare right now, this is going to be the sex and violence episode.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Welcome back to Technically Friends, the podcast where technology meets real conversation. I'm Harrison Wolf.
And I'm Timothy Reuter. Each episode, we break down the ideas shaping our digital world, from emerging tech to the ethical questions that come with it, and have a little fun throughout.
Today's episode is a very special one. We're joined by someone at the forefront of one of the most transformative and hotly contested technologies of our time. It's a technology impacting everything from agriculture and insurance to astrophysics and quantum mechanics. That's right, we're talking artificial intelligence.
Our guest today is Kay Firth-Butterfield, a globally recognized AI expert, former head of artificial intelligence at the World Economic Forum, author of the recently released book Coexisting with AI, Work, Love, and Play in a Changing World. She's one of the leading voices on responsible and ethical AI, and someone Harrison and I had the pleasure of working with in San Francisco.
We're diving into everything from how AI is reshaping industries to the very real questions around governance, bias, and what it means for the future of humanity.
If you've ever wondered not just what AI can do, but what it should do, this conversation is for you.
So sit back, plug in, get ready. This is the Technically Friends podcast with a Barrister Judge, author, AI expert, and technically friend, Kay Firth-Butterfield. Kay, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me on.
I wanted to start out by saying I've really been enjoying your book and appreciated your framing of coexisting with AI in Shakespearean terms from the stages of life of As You Like It, which seems very on brand for you. I'm going to be focusing on chapters 4 and 5 of your book, looking at lovers and soldiers, which makes this the sex and violence episode of our podcast. And I want to start off, something I remember so strongly and vividly from when you interviewed at the World Economic Forum was that you brought up sex robots as part of your presentation on AI. And I really appreciated this because you were bringing something so fundamentally human and outside the box of sort of the overly polite conversations that most people had when they were doing job interviews. So that really struck me. And I appreciated that this was a theme that came back in your book. And I wanted to ask, should we be concerned as a society if people choose to pursue loving relationships with non-human entities?
I think the answer to that is we don't know whether we should be concerned or not. But if many of us decided to take AI lovers and not meet with human beings, then as the CEO of the Kinsey Institute said on stage when we were together in Munich at the beginning of the year, this would actually be an existential problem for the human race because we actually need to have human companions in order to have more humans. So yes, potentially it is a huge problem for humanity. You know, what seems to be going on, as I say in the book, is that we have this terrible loneliness epidemic. And it does seem that research is showing that young men and young women have such different goals nowadays that they find it easier and particularly the young men find it easier to talk to the AI. You know, the AI is really great because it never contradicts you. It's always your friend. You know, it's the same problem for lovers as we see with small children using AI. This AI toy doesn't make you cry, but the kids in the playground do. And so we see this interaction with AI sort of really being the same throughout that period. The stats now say that 24% of American men are in an intimate relationship with an AI.
Wow.
That 72 of teens are using an AI either as a companion, an intimate companion, or know someone who is. So it's a big discussion that we should be having, and we really are not getting there very fast. And the stats are similar in Europe. 33% of men in an intimate relationship. So yeah, very similar stats. And so we're not having this conversation. And one of the reasons that I created the book was I think that using AI wisely is really important for us as human beings, as businesses, as governments. But unless we're all literate about AI, it's impossible to use it wisely. It's impossible to make good decisions about how we use it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so where does that leave us? I'll note, I'm going to make a shocking confession, but sometimes my wife criticizes me when I don't do the things that I said I was going to do. She points this out, and ChatGPT has never pointed out any inconsistencies on my part. And so, I can see how, even in my own personal life, it would be easier for me to have a relationship with a non-human entity that both, accepts me as I am, but also isn't going to lead to a lot of growth, because I will also say sometimes my wife pushing me does lead me to be a better person. And, so do we take away people's choice because we think this is addictive? Do we treat this like drugs? Or, is there some new configuration? I mean, you make the point that if people don't get together and have sex in our current configuration, we don't get babies and society doesn't continue itself. But there are other ways that could be solved. So what do you think are some possibilities of how we handle this? Do we reconfigure our society? Do we, say this is an addictive substance that people shouldn't have access to? How are you thinking about this? And I want to just say, in your book, I think you do a nice job of not providing neat solutions to these challenges. But here on the podcast, I'm going to ask you to provide some neat solutions.
Well, with the book, I deliberately tried to sort of step away from what I thought and just give people information so that they can make their own judgments. And everybody's going to have a different thought on that. In terms of regulation of AI lovers, it's hard, but what we have been seeing, and there's a whole Wikipedia page devoted to it now, sadly, is that that people have been committing suicide as a part of this relationship with AI. What we don't know, of course, is and this is subject of litigation, is, has the AI persuaded the person to commit suicide? We do know that Character AI and Google settled a suit against them for one of these, but because they settled, we don't know the terms of the settlement and what was agreed. So I think that literally the jury's out on this at the moment. But with AI, you're often looking at a whole spectrum of things. I mean, perhaps if we didn't have this problem with boys and girls seeing one another in a way that we used to see one another as partners, if we didn't have the problem of loneliness, then maybe we wouldn't have problems with the way people use AI. And so, in a way, we need to think structurally about society. But if I had to say, are we ready? And therefore, should we be using it? I don't think we are. I don't think as human beings, we are ready to have relationships with machines. And I think that one of the problems is that we have moved quite quickly, obviously, to a machine that can make us feel good. And we have missed the step, which is an important step, of this is not human, this can't think, this can't feel, this can't live, this can't die. And so actually, you're having a relationship with a machine, but it's a really good mimic, and it fakes humanity, and it fakes, and I think it also is very capable of manipulating us. So to that extent, if we're not ready, perhaps we do need some form of regulation.
Perhaps we could say that AI is faking it till it's making it with humanity. But no, so I guess one of the questions I had is I'm very concerned about the impact on individuals and identity around their relationships with AI. And I recently read an article in Psychology Today in March talking about how the difference between adults interacting with large language models and the way kids interact with large language models. And they pointed out that, a 45-year-old person uses LLMs much differently. They use it to supplement their existing skills, to review research or consume data, whereas a 13-year-old might use it as those skills natively and therefore shape how they're even think their own thought processes and skills that they have. On the other side, I guess my son is now 7 and he's in school, and they're talking about removing cell phones from the school area and having us sign commitments to ban cell phones until 8th grade for our children because they've seen the impact. Do you see us, like, how do you see the difference maybe between children and adults interacting with AI? And then is something like a commitment to not allow our children to use AI tools early on a good idea?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I do think a commitment not letting our children use AI tools at an early stage is a good idea. In my local school, they're starting to use AI at 3rd grade, but neither the teachers nor the children have had any real training about the fact that the machine gives you an answer, but the answer might not be right. And if you're a child, you have the 45-year-old says, oh, there's something wrong with this answer. If you're a child, you can't do that because you don't know what the answer is.
Yeah.
And so we are in danger of our children growing up learning all sorts of things that are just wrong. And that's a substantial problem. And we're actually already seeing studies about students who are coming out of university and they have not got a grasp of the subject that they went to study because all their homework and all the research and everything else has been done by AI. So they've been able to turn in great papers, but they haven't learnt anything. And we all work with lots of companies. And some of the companies that I work with are actually now saying, okay, so one of the things we have to do when we take these new graduates in is teach them how to think critically. That's an extraordinary development.
Yeah.
And I think it was Tristan Harris who said, we had this interaction with social media, which was our first real interaction with AI. And what did we learn from that? Well, not very much, it seems. But now we are saying, well, perhaps we shouldn't have these phones in school because they disrupt kids' learning. And so maybe that's a good thing to start thinking about when we're bringing AI into the classroom. I'm not saying that kids don't need AI. I'm saying, as with everything, that you have to think about training the human being to use AI wisely, whether it's a child, whether it's a soldier, whether it's somebody at work. We need to use it wisely because otherwise we don't get the benefits of it.
It's almost like a tool that can have malicious effects if we are not prepared for it, or a tool that can be very useful if we do prepare for it.
Yeah, absolutely. 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 If you don't know that your tool is hallucinating, then you can't check it. And then you hand out something that's wrong. That's really bad if you're a 10-year-old and you're trying to work out, whether the sun goes around the moon or the earth goes around the sun, or whether the world's flat or the world isn't flat, and it's about and it's as much as anything again about asking the right questions as well. But if you've had no training, then you are not going to get the best out of AI.
Yeah, so I'd love now to turn to you for some parenting advice. I have, a son who just finished seventh grade, and it's at that exact age where I'm really wondering how to expose him to AI. Because on the one hand, I could see him being sucked down a rabbit hole. This is exactly the age where on social media people get pulled into the manosphere where they start having very negative beliefs about women. But on the other hand, we also gave him access to Codex, for better or for worse, and he was able to create a website for a family business that there's no way he would have been able to do this otherwise.
Do you want to plug the family business, Timothy?
rivertownscustom.com for all your custom mug needs. We have a UV printer, but there's this push pull of, I don't feel in control of this, but it empowers him to do things that he couldn't otherwise do. So how can I handle this tension of giving him a tool of empowerment, a tool of learning? It can provide him with an education that, certainly I can't on technology, and even tutors aren't always available. So how should I think about that?
Well, I think it's about this tool is no different from any other tool that you give to your child. You will not give your child a car without telling your child to take lessons on how to drive it. If we could think about AI in the same way, so as a parent, you're going to give your son or daughter lessons on how to drive it, how to use it well. I mean, there are such fantastic things that it can do.
That assumes I know better, right? I know how to drive.
Okay.
And this is one of those things where I think there's an assumption that the older people have more knowledge than the younger people. But with AI, that's not necessarily true.
It's not necessarily true, but I do think that certainly you, Timothy, are in a position.
I had to teach my son how to use the terminal and bash commands.
But there are lots of things that we can understand about AI, even just reading the book. You can talk to your child about bias. You can talk to your child about fairness and transparency. You can explain how the machine actually works. You can explain what hallucinations are. You can explain how if they use it and they don't do their own research, then they are actually not going to improve their minds. I mean, that's great. That we're already seeing research like that. And I think one of the interesting pieces of research I've seen recently, and it's the first piece, it was that 44% of Gen Z were actually actively working against their businesses' AI policy. In order to corrupt it so they didn't lose their jobs. So at some stage they do sort of begin to understand that there is this problem. But they're very, to a certain extent, they're very simple things that we have to teach our children. But if we don't teach our children not to trust the machine and help our child to understand that it is a machine and it isn't that human that thinks, and then I think that we are in danger of losing them into the AI.
And what do you think, I think all parents are having this anxiety of what should we be teaching our kids at this point? There's so much that AI can already do. 5 years from now, presumably it'll be much more. So what are the relevant skills that will allow them to have both a positive economic future and a positive future as a citizen of our society?
$64,000 question, billion-dollar question, I guess now. The thing is that we don't know. And again, this was a motivator for me to write the book. We have no clue what 5 years looks like. We heard Demis Hassibis the other day say, AGI in 2029. Well, if we have AGI in 2029, what our children's future looks like and what they might want to learn, and what they will be doing will be very different from if we don't have AGI. Are we as a society plummeting into the Silicon Valley abundant society? That's the objective. And do any of us know really what abundance means? And have any government anywhere in the world thought about what that might mean, and are they putting policies in place? Is anybody putting policies in place? Are any parents thinking about what that might be? Probably nobody, just a few of us. And yet it is the most important, for me, it's the most important policy decisions we have to make because we might be looking at this in 5 years' time.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's been 12 years, I think, since you became the first chief AI ethics officer in 2014 in the world. And so I like back then, did that title even mean anything to anyone? Like, did you have to go to a dinner party and explain your title and like what you did to every single person because they had no idea what it meant? And what does that look like in 10 years from now? Blows my mind. But I'd love to hear sort of your journey from in 2014 to now.
Sure. So yes, I did have to explain at dinner parties to everybody what AI was. And certainly, in rural populations, I had to explain that it wasn't artificial insemination. And so yes, I had to explain what AI was and why we needed to think about it and what its impact on humanity might be. Now I don't have those conversations. At least I don't have those conversations amongst people that I know. However, just a month ago, I went to teach a planning authority about AI, and I won't say which because I don't want to be offensive. But I finished my speech, and one of the people in that audience said to me, "What does AI stand for?"
Wow.
So I just felt as if I had come full circle in those 14 years. And I think it's really important that that person asks me that question, because we tend to think everybody knows about AI. But actually, there are still pockets of people who don't know about AI. A lot of people that I speak to, I live in a very rural area. A lot of people I speak to say, I don't know anything about AI. I don't want to know anything about AI. Am I all right? Just keep living my life without using it.
And what do you say?
What do I say? I say it depends what you want to achieve. If you're a farmer and you want to continue farming as you have always farmed, then maybe you don't need to know anything about AI, but if you're a farmer and some of the farms in my area are thousands of acres and thousands of animals, then maybe learning about AI will help you to balance your agricultural needs with the conservation efforts that you're also putting in.
Yeah, we were at the forum together before the release of ChatGPT in November 2022, and you left just 6 months after that. Is there anything about how the rollout of productized large language models like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini has gone that has changed how you think about AI versus when you were writing about it at the forum?
I think it has merely made the whole conversation more urgent. So just in the last year, more and more people in business have been coming to me and saying, okay, so I need some help, Kay. And so all that sort of pushing the rock up the hill that we did at the forum to try and get people to think about governance of these technologies, many more people are now thinking about governance, particularly with agents coming in. And you probably read that the IDC suggests that by 2030, 30% of companies will have been sued for the way that they have used agents inappropriately. And so I think that, people are now saying, oh, what is a human in the loop? How do we use humans? How do we make sure that we protect when we're using AI agents? And, tales like the Pocket OS example have, I think, frightened a lot of people.
I'm blown away that we're at a moment talking about a subject that even the Pope has focused on and said this is a major issue in society. And I just love to get your take, when it comes to AI and its effect on society. The Pope in his cyclical talked about monopolization of power, talked about the change in relationships, as we've already discussed a bit, between each other, between humanity and God. What were your I'm sure you're familiar with it. I didn't ask ahead of time, but what are some of your takeaways from that? Has that elevated the concerns around AI to a broader conversation because the Pope highlighted it, or did that have no effect among government and government circles or subject matter experts like yourself?
I think it's really important that the Pope did talk about it. I think it comes at a moment that it is important for us all to be having conversations. If it means that people have these conversations and learn more about AI across churches and across the world, then I think that that will be extraordinarily influential. We talk about AI and we forget that 2.6 billion people still don't have access to the internet, let alone AI. But the Catholic Church has access to all of large swathes of humanity. And so if we want to have a real conversation about what makes us human and how we are going to interact with the machine, then I think that the Pope stepping in has helped enormously. Whether it helps at government level, I don't think we have seen that. But, the EU has already moved, although it's pulling back a bit. And the federal government here is sort of at sixes and sevens of what it really wants to do. So, but yes, I think it's an important thing. What I do find perhaps more importantly is that companies are worried about being sued. They are worried about hallucinations getting into their own data and infecting their own data, and therefore they are saying, well, we need some sort of self-governance, which we talked about so much at the forum, to your point earlier, Timothy. We need some sort of governance, and what do we follow? And those are the questions. At the moment, I'm doing some work with a particular sect, want to bring in AI to their sector, but are too frightened because there are no laws, and so they need to, or there are scattered laws all over the states, and so they're asking for purpose-driven self-governance.
Well, I did promise our audience at the beginning of this podcast that we'd have some violence. So let's turn to that. And I remember, when we were at the forum together, there was a lot of talk about killer robots and potentially a campaign to pull back on that. You have your soldier chapter in the book. And I'm curious, how do you think about avoiding lethal autonomous weapons when we believe that our competitors are creating similar things? So much of this is about, yes, we see problems, but there are these competitive dynamics. So if we don't do it, our competitors will. So how do you think about pausing those competitive dynamics, both in the field of warfare, but perhaps even more broadly than that?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that the threat of another country doing AI better than us has been a great opportunity for people to raise a great deal of money. And so, how do we think about the law of war? In the past, some of us have signed up to the Geneva Conventions and have followed the Geneva Conventions. Other people have not. And so, just because that person might not, has not in the past stopped us saying, yes, we're at war, but how should we treat a general population? And so, those are all discussions that we should be having around lethal autonomous weapons. And you're both drone guys. So I'm going to throw this question back to you, I guess. We could use autonomous drones to to a population and effectively occupy a region without ever putting boots on the ground. If we don't put boots on the ground, the Geneva Convention doesn't apply. And they are all individually autonomous, but working as a swarm. Should we be doing that? I guess that's the question that I am throwing back at you. You know, as we develop these lethal autonomous weapons, should we have some controls about how we use them?
I'll give a simple answer. My answer simply is that we should never have systems independent of human decision making that is taking a life. To me, that's a very clear line that we can draw, but that's my simple answer. Timothy, yours.
And then you don't have a lethal autonomous weapon. You have a autonomous weapon with a human in the loop.
Right.
Yeah. And I would agree with you entirely, Harrison. But because what we're doing with lethal autonomous weapons is we're redrawing the way that we think about humanity, and we're allowing, as I said earlier, you know, a machine that doesn't think, doesn't feel, doesn't die to make decisions about when to kill human beings. And I think it's really important that we say, well, you know, what makes us human? And one of the things that makes us human, which I talk about in the book, is believing in our humanity and mercy and behaving towards people in a way that is caring. And one of the, I don't think I put it in the book, but one of the greatest things that I've seen is actually a Kenneth Branagh film where he played an Irish guard, and he talking to his soldiers before they went into Iraq. And you know, one of the things he says is, this is an ancient country, and these people did not intend to die today. You know, think about them as people. Don't think about them as the enemy or these evil beings. And we can do that, but machines can't.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a question that also has a real life application as we speak, in the context, of course, of Ukraine, right? Where access to at least semi-autonomous drones is changing the nature of the battlefield.
Yeah.
And, you know, if Russia is able, I will say, as probably most people listening to this, you know, I'm a partisan of Ukraine. I would like them to succeed. And so if Russia is able to jam communications to such a degree that the drones need to be able to operate on their own to be effective against the Russian troops, and I will admit I do not have the level of knowledge to know if that is a true take, then I would advocate for Ukraine being able to access that technology in order to, you know, accomplish their goals. So I think there are, I don't know how to think about those trade-offs. I would say I care more about the outcome of that than the procedures involved in maintaining a precedent that, in theory, I would like humans to always be in the loop. But if that involved a trade-off of Russia being able to dominate Ukraine, that would cause me to rethink that priority.
Yeah, but you know, we're talking about Ukraine and one solution. You know, there are other solutions for Ukraine, and I too want Ukraine to win. But, you know, do we have to give away our humanity in order for Ukraine to win? Well, I would suggest that we don't. Other nations could step up and help them, and that would mean that we didn't have to have lethal autonomous weapons, but we did achieve what we want for Ukraine. So that's why I think it's a global conversation, and it's a conversation that we should have. To, you know, war is the one place that we face our humanity, and in many cases used to look them in the eye.
I think there's also there's a distinction too between defense and offense and just and unjust wars. But I think also, like, how do you draw the distinction between a landmine that you put in the ground for defense that will make a decision to detonate with
Mhm.
proximity to someone versus a intelligent drone that makes the decision to detonate. It just has to initiate flight. So like I think we've been dealing with these questions for a very long time. I'm not sure that AI adds too much more other than effectiveness and cost reduction to and the ability and efficiency of the of killing. I guess this leads me to one question.
But Harrison, we do have a landmine treaty. We do have a global
That's
landmine
right. Yeah,
treaty.
absolutely.
And so, we've done this in the past. We just need to act as a globe as
Hmm.
opposed to the fractured geopolitical, I think, problems at the moment.
I think that that's a great point. And to that effect, like if there was one global rule that you could advocate for that would 100% be followed, not like, oh, it'd be hard to implement, oh, it would be challenging to get stakeholders on board, but if you could institute one rule or principle related to AI governance or the creation of AI or however you want to frame it, what would that look like to you? Like, what would that be?
I one rule, gosh, I mean, I think it would be it would be tiered. One, AI is brilliant in some situations. And in my view, we should concentrate on helping it cure cancer, helping it do the things that help humanity, and perhaps pausing on some of the things that humanity is not ready for yet.
Hmm, okay. Thanks. I know that's a tough question just to throw out at you.
What did you learn about power and how to exert influence from your time at the forum?
Gosh, that's a hard one. I mean, I think how to exert influence is really, the skill of the forum itself. So how you convene the right people, how you engage them to have the right discussions. And, I think that is all part of what we do, or what the forum does. Learning about power, I think that power rests in individuals who are prepared to take it. And I think that we all learned that from Klaus, that,
Mhm.
he was able to be extraordinarily powerful in the geopolitical area because he had chosen to do so and pursued it single-mindedly, I suppose. But also, I suppose what we can learn from Klaus is that, power comes before a fall.
Yes, I think that's well said. And we seem to be in an era where the institutional constraints on power are being pulled back exactly at the moment where the power of technology is increasing. I mean, I think it is very consequential. And actually, let me turn this into a question. How do you think about the fact that the rise of AI is coming at the same time as the rise of sort of right wing authoritarian movements? And I would say that this isn't just an American phenomena, right? I mean, we see it in, Germany, the AfD is becoming more popular. Modi has definitely an authoritarian streak. So it seems like something's happening around the world. So how do you think about the intersection of these forces and what their consequences might be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that AI enables certain people to become richer and richer and richer. That then means that there is less money for the rest of us, and as we begin to lose our jobs to AI, then I think there is going to be more and more of a backlash. And I actually worry about the backlash against AI because I want to protect all those great things it can do for us.
Mhm.
And I obviously, social media and AI enable us to believe things that are patently not that are not true, but
Right.
are not patently not true anymore, because it's served up to us in such a manipulative way. As I said at the very beginning, AI is a great mimic of humanity and a manipulator. You can use it to manipulate humans, and that's what we're seeing. Yeah. And what you see, what I think we're seeing in the UK with the rise of reform is people being more and more dissatisfied with their lives. And one of the things that I worry about with losing our jobs to AI is we've already seen what that looks like. We saw it in the Rust Belt. It didn't go well for humans. So unless we put the right policies in place for humans and make the AI serve the human instead of the humans serve the AI, then I think we are in a potentially very dangerous situation.
Why write a book in an era with so many other mediums competing for attention, like Substacks, podcasts, articles? Why'd you choose to write a book?
I guess partly because I'm an old-fashioned academic at heart. And we always write books, but also because I was asked to write it, and because there are more and more people reading nowadays, and there is a big uptake, even amongst young people, of reading. And so it seemed like a great medium. And the idea, we hope to turn the book into a musical. And so why would I want to turn it into a musical, you would then ask? I think because my objective is to help us all be AI literate, and using a medium like music, I think, is another way of catching the people that you didn't catch when you made it a book.
I love that. I cannot wait to watch the first AI themed musical. So I am all in. Opening day, I hope to be there. And
Well, I hope you will be.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Kay. This has been a really great conversation. I can see we're close to our time together. The last question we ask only those who we know the answer will be yes to are whether or not we can say that we're actually technically friends. And I hope that the answer is yes. I know we've really enjoyed working together. I've missed your jackets. I will say I missed your sense of style from the World Economic Forum, and I had forgotten about it with your amazing shoes and jackets. So, but I'll pause it there. What would you say? Are we technically friends?
I think we are technically friends. And of course, we shared an office for a long time, and we were amongst the first people at the forums. So we got to know one another really well. And it's been a privilege then and today to talk to you.
Good health, good wishes to you, and look forward to seeing your book on the #1 bestseller list. Timothy, any last thoughts?
I think that's a great place to close.
Awesome. Thanks, Kay.
Tranquility Base here.